embarking on a new type of Pokemon journey for us, as we share what we have as consideration the most effective type in the history of competitive singles. It is quite subjective, one you believe worth sharing, or even if you don't personally gel precisely with subjectivity on display, when explained in detail, it might give you the inclination to think about the subject a bit yourself. Now, seeing a competitive Pokemon does not exist in a vacuum, we are dealing with some theoretical optimal typing, as said typing would still only be experienced through the Pokemon it was given to, which would be greatly influenced by their other significant traits. That's why we went through competitive history and landed on our selection. So join us as we explore the best type combination in competitive singles. But before we start, don't let the cold stop you from enjoying the holidays, because this video is sponsored by MeUndies. Guys, it's cold, and whether you or someone else needs nice warm clothing during the winter, MeUndies has got you covered on that holiday shopping. MeUndies doesn't just do underwear though, they also do loungewear, including hoodies, joggers, and pajamas. This penguin print joggers has been super comfortable all holiday season for me. But of course, MeUndies was kind enough to send me more of their staple underwear. I requested this funny looking Yowie Christmas print to be festive. Obviously, this isn't the only print. The most comfortable underwear in the world comes in a variety of prints. I really like the desert sky and totally awesome print that I have. These designs are really nice and remind me to stay cozy as I sleep in them. There's over 10 different styles of undies ranging from boxer briefs to jock straps, and there are over 100 different colors and prints. Pick one that you like and you won't be disappointed. And of course, MeUndies is so confident that if you don't like your first pair of undies, then it's on MeUndies, free of charge. Knock out all of your holiday gift needs with MeUndies and go to MeUndies.com/FSG and use code FSG to get savings all month long. And thank you so much to MeUndies for sponsoring this video. Our journey wasn't an easy one though. At first we thought about Steel Fairy, a typing so good it had Klefki being used in Gen 6 OU, before launching to Magearna to Gen 7 Superstardom, including in Ubers, before getting banned from OU in the following gen. The typing was also a major factor in getting Zacian Crown banned from Gen 8 Ubers, and even after getting nerfed, it continues to rule Ubers in Gen 9. It's pretty much what you'd expect from pairing two of the best types in the game. We also considered Steel Flying, whose history dates back to the ancient Romans using Skarmory to counter the otherwise unstoppable Earthquake Snorlax, and progressed through many a generation with it spiking all over creation. Then there was Celesteela, and afterwards Corviknight, keeping up the tradition. Ultimately though, we settled on the ground flying type for its defining excellence, since given a proper OU Pokemon in Gen 4 and a second in Gen 5 for its malleability into a nigh endless variety of various utilities, both offensive and defensive, with the two.
The Ultimate Bundle just keeps getting better. With the most anticipated new releases.
What happens next? Join me.
I am back, baby! We're going to Hollywood.
You and me, we're in this together now. It's just the beginning.
The Disney Plus Hulu Max Bundle. Plans starting at $16.99 a month.
Feeding into each other, i.e. being good on offense makes the defense easier to execute, since you're not just walling the opponent, but can take their hits and threaten to strike back, and in many cases outspeed too, which assists on both offense and defense and how they complement each other. Of course, this relates strongly to the stats of the specific ground flying types, Gliscor and Landorus, and despite it not being a trail outright inherent to their typing, the typing does allow them to use their stats to the fullest. They will not be nearly as adept at their ability to take out what has felt like pretty much everything at one point if they were to draw an absurd counterpoint for the sake of example, ice bug types or something. For proof of the typing's dominance, we don't just have to point to Gliscor and Landorus, two of the best competitive Pokemon of all time, whose self-evident dominance has been engraved in the collective psyche of the competitive Pokemon world ever since the Obama administration. We could also look at Gligar. If that sounds too easy because hey, it's a mini Gliscor, of course it's gonna be good. Well, consider how simply being a pre-evolution of an elite Pokemon is not necessarily representative of the ability to ape the evolution's success in lower tiers. There's a reason people haven't recreated Garchomp's success in lower tiers with Gabite. Gligar really embodies the essence of ground flying's excellence because it doesn't really even have the excuse of its stats carrying it. It has good defense, but not very good HP, and its speed is solid, but not more. Eviolite? Yes, definitely a boon. But number one, that means it has to manually relieve itself of every bit of damage, no matter how small, with Roost, which is much more exploitable than its evolution, famous for healing passively. Speaking of being passive, let's not forget Gligar's attack stat. Number two, Gligar is regularly used in tiers where knockoff is spam, and it has no choice but to eat the knockoff, because what else is going to switch in against something like Gen 6 UU Heracross? And even after losing the Eviolite, it's still great. That's the typing doing the work for it. It's certainly not the stats alone, and the move pool is good but not earth-shattering. It only gets the opportunity to put the work in because the typing gives it so many opportunities. Consider this, the not fully evolved Gligar was well and truly UU as late as Generation 7, enduring unbelievable power creep even as it became progressively easier to get rid of that Eviolite that it supposedly crutches on. It wouldn't have been surprising at all for it to have been UU once again in Gen 8 had it been in the game. No Z moves or hidden power ice, Cobalion and Excadrill everywhere, yeah, Gligar would have eaten it up. It even currently has a small niche in the outrageously power-crept UU of Gen 9. It's very good in RU, and it's excellent in NU. It showed off the greatness of its typing without Eviolite too. It was great in Gen 4's NU and had a niche in UU, and downright outstanding in Gen 3's UU, though it lacked taunt and knockoff. It was even effective in Gen 2 UU when it had almost no move pool to speak of, mostly relying on Thief. It didn't even have Swords Dance, and had to use Screech instead. Its typing has been the hard carry for it since it was first introduced, underbaked design and all. Oh, and if we throw Little Cup into the mix, Gligar utterly dominated in Gen 4. The first gen the tier was played seriously, and was subsequently banned for being utterly insane in every generation after. So what is it about this typing that brings out the best in its Pokemon? What does it have that lets it not just pull off the aforementioned with Gligar, but lets Landorus T and Gliscor ceaselessly adapt their movesets to take on everything, including their own checks, even going as far back as Gen 4 before Gliscor even had Poison Heal. First, we will examine the strengths of both types individually, as it's critical to understand the strengths ground and flying types have on their own, and then when we see how they function upon coming together, we will see exactly why their sensibilities make for such a perfect match. Ground has been one of the sturdiest defensive types since the first generation for its crucial electric immunity. Not every ground is a hard counter to every electric in the wake of hidden power, but simply having the immunity is superb for pivoting around electric, among the most dangerous offensive Pokemon in the game, especially once Volt Switch came around. And that's just the beginning. Ground types are renowned as a whole for taking on many of the biggest threats around. This is because they are generally blessed with great bulk, but this doesn't go hand in hand with them resisting everything in and of themselves. It's more the fact that they are neutral to so many moves, which lets the bulk carry them, especially because they are incredibly resilient in the face of common battle conditions. They're neutral to Stealth Rock and immune to Sandstorm. Furthermore, ground types tend to have access to superb utility moves, way before Gen 9 gave everything spikes, most notably. Grounds have always been among the most popular setters of Stealth Rock itself. Of course, many ground types do have more resist by virtue of secondary typing, Swampert, Garchomp, Excadrill, and it demonstrates how well ground tends to pair with other types. However, let's look at a pure ground, the most essential example being Hippowdon. Yes, its rock resist is useful, most famously for eating up Tyranitar's Choice Band Stone Edge, but its poison resist is almost never coming into play. However, it's more about what it's not weak to. Hippowdon eats up all manner of neutral attacks from important, dangerous offensive types, most notably including but absolutely not limited to Dragon, Fire, Fighting, and Ground itself. Depending on its bulk investment, it can also find itself shrugging off even many moves it's weak to. And we're not just talking weak, non-stab hidden power ices either. High-level tournament play has witnessed specially defensive Hippowdon stalling out max special attack Leaf Storm Celebi on multiple occasions. That's the defensive side. Meanwhile, offensively, Ground is an excellent type for the simple fact that it gets stabbed on one of the most spammed important moves in the game, Earthquake. The super effective coverage against Steel, Fire, Rock, and Poison is killer, and it hits so much of the rest of the type chart for neutral damage, which is wonderful considering the apt attack stats of most grounds. It's taken on by Flying, Grass, and and Bug, as well as Levitate Pokemon, most commonly flying, but that's exactly why Stone Edge is such eternally great coverage with it, complementing the Stealth Rock that already tends to put in work. Even most waters usually tasked with handling grounds don't actually resist it. What's particularly great though is the aforementioned ability of strong offensive capability enhancing defense. If you're a defensive Pokemon and you've got a Stab Earthquake with which you'll be managing that offensive Fire or Steel, you'll usually be just fine. Conversely, the defensive aptitude of even offensive grounds like Garchomp lets them hit the field more effectively and thus dish out more damage. Finally, on the downside, many grounds, Garchomp being a notable exception, tends toward being much slower than the opposition. In addition to the aforementioned Hippowdon, Gastrodon is another famous example. Most flying types have secondary typing that muddle the concept of flying as a typing in and of itself, but the multi-generational success of the incredible Tornadus has demonstrated the potential to its fullest. So we can speak about it outside the realm of the purely theoretical. You know how Stab Earthquake is one of the most spammable moves in the game? Well, the main reason it's not even more spammable than it already is because of flying types. Flyers have also long since hovered over the spikes that dominate gen after gen. So already, flyers are incredible for being completely immune to two of the most fundamentally powerful elements of the game. It almost makes sense that Stealth Rock was introduced when it was, and with the power effect that it has. Flying types also tended to receive Roost then, and would have felt borderline immortal. It wasn't just the anti-ground effort that made flying so effective too. It also resisted another one of the emerging scariest offensive types in the game, fighting. With just these two types, it's got an impressive repertoire of crucial resists under its belt, and it goes further. With its grass resist that only gets more important over time, even the often overlooked Bug resist is invaluable in a world of U-turn. Now, flyers are generally too wide-ranging to be grouped in under the same umbrella as far as utility is concerned. Definitely more than grounds, which already have a great deal of variety to them, though they're more similar to each other to the point of being interchangeable in many cases. However, what flyers do tend to have in common is also a great focus on utility moves. The Fog was big Gen 6 and later, yes, but even before, as different as, say, Skarmory and Zapdos were, they still emphasize a support-based approach to their playstyle. Even when Zapdos was running more offensive sets, it still had the propensity to run all manner of utility, such as Thunder Wave and U-turn. Tornadus encapsulated this perfectly, critically adding knockoff to the mix, while also representing the offensive side of flying. Flyers also tend to be on the faster side, not always, but generally. Offensively, flying was largely secondary to its type's defensive approach. There were a few pure offensive flyers, like Staraptor and Honchkrow, but the price those paid for their massive Brave Birds was a near complete uselessness offensively. Other aggressive offensive flyers like Talonflame and Thundurus, when the former wasn't using support sets of course, tended to be more balanced in this regard, even though they were running offensive sets, less extreme offensively, but more reliable defensively, even sometimes sprinkling some utility moves in there like Taunt, and thus it came full circle in making them more reliable offensively. Still, Brave Bird was largely relegated as Skarmory's source of damage for some time, and while it was decent at warding off some targets in particular, it was far from spammable. Flying was without a useful stab for some time. Gen 3 had hidden power flying on a few Pokemon like Salamence, which was both a great offensive and defensive Pokemon, but by and large, it was limited. Even in the post-Hurricane era, the move's spotty accuracy made it difficult to rely on consistently. Still, if one could pull off flying offensively, the rewards were immense, as demonstrated not just by Tornadus T, Staraptor, and Honchkrow, but by the likes of Mega Pinsir, who was punishing a certain period in Oraz OU for its dearth of reliable flying resist. Yes, it was resisted by Steel, Rock, and Electric, but this wasn't anything an effective flyer couldn't get past. Now, let's examine why ground and flying synergize so well together. Individually, they already have some of the best, most important resists in the game, and when you combine them, you receive an incredible new level of utility. First, we must recognize that these are played as grounds first and foremost, as alluded to in the flying section. Flying is often a secondary complementary type. Tornadus is a unique exception. Most of the time, though, flying has an almost ambient effect on its user. It's not there at the forefront, as you're thinking of Gyarados as a water type or Zapdos Gyarados as an electric type generally. But this is not to downplay its importance. Though not as immediate and direct in impact, the flying type is very much there and absolutely critical to success. We see this in the case of Gliscor and Landorus above all else. These function like grounds because they are responding to most of their opponents through Stab Earthquake, and because their defensive makeup means the Pokemon they generally take on being similar to most other grounds. There have been many cases of stall teams that cycle between Gliscor and Hippowdon, for example, despite their differences, because when it comes down to it, they are used to take on Pokemon like Tyranitar and Dragons regardless. With this in mind, we see ground types that are immune to spikes. This is incredible for longevity. Many grounds are famously vulnerable to Skarmory and wind up getting worn down by its spikes, as one example. Not that Gliscor and Landorus don't have their share of contention with Skarm, of course, but they are not getting passively worn down for their weakness to it, which assists in the team-wide effort against it, which can sometimes consist of Gliscor and Landorus themselves, thanks to their typing giving them flexibility to delve into their move pools to tackle the problem. By pairing ground with flying, you also get a defensive ground that takes on opposing grounds even more efficiently, thanks to the complete immunity to Earthquake as opposed to simply leveraging neutrality and bulk. And in this vein, you also get a defensive ground that resists fighting. The defensive reach here is superb. The really beautiful part of this is that you are getting these benefits of the flying type without adding a stealth rock weakness, either with ground canceling out the rock weakness in a Skarmory-esque manner, and this doesn't just extend the stealth rock either. You now have this bulky ground that is immune to ground and resistant to fighting without being weak to rock. Remember earlier how we mentioned Stone Edge as the perfect complement to Earthquake? Well, here you go. And Stone Edge is the perfect complement to close combat too. You get a stealth rock neutral U-turn resist as well. And as a bonus, by making these grounds half flying, you also get a speed stat far more representative of flyers, which is superior to the general low speed of grounds. Of course, by combining their typing, you also tend to lose something, and this is the case. You lose flying's resist to grass, but consider that these are played as ground types first and foremost. This is actually a net positive, because what you really have is a ground neutral to grass. The main negative of these two typings coming together is that they create a quadruple ice weakness. This means that fighters with Ice Punch can be an issue, and that they can't make use of the electric immunity as well, since the default of many electric types tends to be Hidden Power Ice, since it also hits grasses. Though when they come across the likes of Heat Wave to Fog Zapdos or an HP Iceless Tapu Koko, the ability to stifle them is utterly incredible. However, one of the great strengths of Gliscor and Landorus is that they don't necessarily need a hard counter everything. Simply being able to pivot into an electric type, like to block a Volt Switch, is a wonderful option to have, harkening back to the GSC tradition of using a ground type to absorb Thunder and draw a hidden power for Snorlax to switch in against more comfortably. Additionally, both Gliscor and Landorus T are famous for being able to withstand even ice moves, as with Intimidate, Landorus T eats up many non-stab ice punches, while Gliscor in particular has left many a metagame confounded as its specially defensive Sword Stance set repeatedly roosted off Hidden Power Ices and even Ice Beams en route to boosting up and sweeping teams that, on paper, were perfectly prepared against it. Heck, Gliscor made its initial mark in this regard by regularly stalling Rotom Wash out of Hydro Pumps. If this is how well they tank just about the strongest moves thrown at them, one can see how excellent they are at shrugging off all manner of powerful neutral moves. To draw two famous examples, Landorus T intimidates Outrageous and Gliscor roosts off Draco Meteors. This gives them the best of both worlds of both grounds and flyers. They have a tremendous set of not only resists, but also neutralities, which let them use their bulk to superb effect. For a long time in Gen 7 OU, Gliscor was the best counter around to something as strong as Z Heatran, an incredibly powerful special attacker whose stab Gliscor didn't resist. And this was just defensively too. You'll notice for much of this video, we said Landorus, not Landorus Therian specifically. Yes, Gliscor and Landorus T are the ones that define OU, but only because Landorus Incarnate, the original Landorus, so badly destroyed OU as to have been banned from every generation it's been in. Incidentally, it's worth mentioning that, though we're focusing on OU, both Gliscor and Landorus Therian have been utterly excellent in many of the generation of Ubers as well, which demonstrates the effectiveness of ground flying pretty much no matter where you go. Its frailty means it's not a defensive place, true, but that doesn't mean it has any less of a beneficiary of that amazing ground flying typing. The Earthquake immunity lets it hit the field, the Spikes immunity means it's not being passively worn down, the fighting resist lets it take advantage of several key choice Pokemon locked into their best move, and it can't be revenge killed by Mach Punch's priority, and once it's on the field, it unleashes something even better than Stab Earthquake, Stab Earth Power, which is weaker in base power, but a million times stronger thanks to Sheer Force and the Life Orb it gets to use without recoil. If it doesn't have the ground flying typing, it's about a million times easier to stop from blowing through everything in its path. It doesn't use Flying Stab, but that flying typing lets it soar into the stratosphere threat level wise. Landorus Therian is even more vicious as far as its typing, letting it fire off its impressive, often overlooked offenses, with an attack stat rivaling Groudon's, since its bulk is augmented by Intimidate, creating more opportunities. It doesn't hit as hard immediately, but it's got a whole host of ways it can rip through the opponent, and some of them do even include Flying Stab. In Gen 7, one of its greatest weapons was its insanely powerful Flying Turn Supersonic Sky Strike, which absolutely throttled most of the meta off strength alone, and beautifully complemented its powerful, often Swords Dance boosted Earthquake, since it prevented the grass-type Tangrowth from walling it. It was so good, it could even just use Fly straight up, and not be totally reliant on the Z move. Only Landorus T. Most of the time, it wasn't packing Flying Stab, of course, but it didn't need to. Now, Gliscor has almost always gone with a bulky build alongside Poison Heal for quite a long time, so much of its offensive threat comes from the same defensive setup, even if it's got Swords Dance. However, it has had many instances in its first two gens of wielding the flying part of its stab to tremendous effect. In Gen 5, it tended to wield an all-out flying gem acrobatics set, which was one of the most frightening Pokemon in the tier for sheer power after a Swords Dance, nigh uncounterable without Skarmory or Bronzong. In Gen 4, it ran offensive Swords Dance sets that didn't necessarily have to run Flying Stab, but if they did, they used something thoroughly unique, Power Herb Sky Attack, which after a Swords Dance absolutely deleted bulky would-be answers like Milotic. While its excellent coverage didn't even need a Swords Dance to completely turn the tables on the likes of Machamp or Celebi. Overall though, it was the same principle that even without Flying Stab itself, the flying typing gave it the opportunities that allowed Gliscor's more prominent Swords Dance Earthquake strategy to shine. And of course, the ultimate irony with Gliscor and Landorus Therian that sums up their whole experience is that they were amazing offensive ground types, but as flying types, they were amazing answers to offensive ground types, so they were often amazing answers to themselves. And that's it. Many cases could be made for different typing combinations, of course. Let us know if you agree, or if not, which typing combinations you'd like us to cover in the future. Steel Flying has a serious case for how well Skarmory, Celesteela, and Corviknight have fared for so long. Alternatively, let us know what you think of the specifics of ground and flying. There is, of course, a near endless list of ways we can appreciate their many talents, both in the abstract sense of the typing itself, and how it can be applied to Gliscor and both Landorus forms. So, leave a comment. Thanks so much for watching, everyone, and as always, if you liked the video and you want to see more, be sure to subscribe to False Swipe Gaming for more weekly Pokemon content. And thank you so much to our patrons for continued support of our videos. And thank you to everyone else watching as well. And thank you so much to our Platinum patrons. Thank you to Amphozenus, Alex Sable, Anthony Belval Renault, Bingleton, Daniel Isbeast, Dr. Mint, Funky, Glitcherton, Howl, Nurse Jake, Jack G, Lord of the Rabbit, Skylaria, Soras and Croxon, Shiwei Miji, Stoneface Colin, Kiboflu, and Quetzalcoatl Northropi for their major support of our videos. And follow my crew on these social media platforms. And that's all I got. See you next time, everyone.
Welcome to JJ's. What do you have?
I'll have a number one.
One NFL on CBS streams live on Paramount Plus. Good choice.
No, it's a cheeseburger.
Is it?
I'll just have fries.
Of course. And a side of the NFL on CBS streams live on Paramount Plus.
What's going on right now?
Well, the NFL on CBS streams live on Paramount Plus. Oh, hang on. There's a toy. Ah, look at him go.
True to its name.